This story is told in the beginning. And in the beginning, there were two gods who were brothers. And like many brothers, they struggled with each other for power and dominance and ascendance, and they didn't dance, they fought. One brother was the king of the forces of activity, life, light, and warmth. He wore a crown made of green oak branches and brought with him all growth and vitality, fertility, and abundance. He was called the Oak King. His brother was the king of the forces of rest, death, cold, and darkness. He wore a crown made of the prickly holly branches and brought with him all withering and decay, stillness and hibernation. He was called the Holly King. The two brothers were identical in strength, and so year after year the same pattern was repeated. Beginning at the winter solstice, the Oak King would gradually grow strong and mighty, and during his time of dominance, the light would slowly increase day by day, bringing with it warmth and abundance. But each year, at the height of his power, at the summer solstice, he would be thrown down by the Holly King. In the wake of the Holly King's victory, the light would gradually wane, and as it did, cold would come, and the land would go dormant. But at the height of the Holly King's power, at each winter solstice, he would be challenged again by the Oak King, and he would fall, and the cycle would repeat again and again and again. And this is where we are now, approaching the time when the Holly King will be defeated, and the Oak King can again start to bring the warmth and light to our land. This is a cause for celebration, is it not? Alone the brothers were equals, but soon there came beings known as people. And the people watched the cycle of the two brothers fighting, and pretty soon they began to take sides. The people loved light and warmth, and they feared darkness and cold. And so, each year, they would celebrate the victory of the Oak King at the winter solstice, but they would mourn the victory of the Holly King at the summer solstice. When the two struggled with each other, the people would lend the strength of their voices and their bodies, their minds and their spirits to the Oak King, but the Holly King was without their support. And so time went by. Over time, the people's adoration of warmth and light only grew, and so they began to invent more and more new ways to find light in the darkness and warmth in the cold, until, if they wanted to, they could spend all of their time in the light they had created, and they could be warm all year long, just as we are now. But their efforts to stay always in the light and the warmth were not without consequences. Generations passed, and generations again, and the people did not at first notice the shifts in the balance, but finally they could ignore it no longer. The people began to notice that the darkness was disappearing from the land. Driven out by millions of lights the people had created, animals, birds, plants, and even people themselves began to suffer the effects of light unbalanced by darkness. But it was not just darkness that was disappearing. Cold began to flee too. The whole world began to get warmer. Summer began sooner and lasted longer. Ice that had been frozen far longer than the longest memory of the oldest person in the land began to melt. Migrating birds and animals began to be confused about when to begin the migration. Plants found themselves rooted in climates that no longer supplied their needs. The air was changing, and the winds that had brought rain and taken it away again began to flow in unexpected directions, causing drought here and flood there. The people began to see that their support of warmth and light over cold and darkness had altered the balance of the whole world. They began, slowly, one at a time, to realize that the Holly King was dying. And for the first time, this thought filled them with fear. What would happen if the balance continued to be destroyed? Could they even survive in a world without the Holly King? And in the world of the gods, the Oak King realized it too. And though they had been competitors all these many centuries, he also realized that he loved his brother deeply and could not live without him. The longest night came, at the winter solstice, and the Oak King and the Holly King met again. But this time, the Oak King had no heart for the fight. He laid down his sword and his spear. He came open-handed to his brother, who was struggling just to stay on his feet, and said, "I am the Oak King. I bring life to death, warmth to cold, and light to dark. I am as strong and green as the mighty oak. My days are long and merry, and I am all that is growth, activity, and vitality. And you, my brother, what art do you perform?" The Oak King wrapped the Holly King in a tight embrace, and he promised to set aside their differences and to help his brother heal. On this night, when he usually claimed ascendance, he realized that the world was already too warm and too light, and so he laid the great crown on the head of his brother, and he did it willingly. The Holly King replied, "I am the Holly King. I bring death to life, cold to warmth, and dark to light. I am as everlasting and evergreen as the hardy holly. My days are short and restful, and I am all that is withering, respite, and renewal. And I am here, my brother, to take my crown." And that is the story of how the Holly King and the Oak King stopped fighting at the solstices and started celebrating instead, to show the people that both the dark and the light are important polarities, both essential to their survival. Instead of fighting, each brother celebrated the other for just one day and let him rule, before willingly conceding at each solstice, knowing and trusting that his time would come again in perfect balance. Their balance became not an endless battle for dominance, but an endless cycling dance around each other. And now in this season, we celebrate the dark, taking our guidance from the two sacred brothers and trusting that the light will return. May your holiday be restful, restorative, and balancing. The end.